Public money combined with private will catalyze over $500 billion of investment over the course of the next decade in Canada. We're not sending the money to the United States. We're investing it here in Canada to grow its economy.
For decades, Canada's strength was built on a simple foundation: close geographic ties to the United States, deep economic integration, and strong security cooperation. But today, that model is being reevaluated. What was once seen purely as an advantage is now being viewed through a more complex lens. And Mark Carney has signaled that shift clearly, not quietly, not indirectly, but in a way that suggests a meaningful change in how Canada approaches its future. This is no longer only about cooperation. It is increasingly about independence, and that shift is unfolding in real time. What makes this moment important is not just the announcement itself, but the way the issue has been framed. For the first time at this level, a Canadian Prime Minister has openly acknowledged that Canada's deep relationship with the United States, a relationship that supported decades of growth, may also carry risks under certain conditions. And this perspective did not emerge in isolation. It reflects broader changes in global dynamics and decisions coming out of Washington. When a key partner becomes less predictable, reliance can begin to look different. What was once a clear advantage can start to feel like exposure.
You know, as I said on the first day of the federal campaign, I came here, and what I heard was concerns from Nova Scotians about how rapidly the world is changing, was changing then, still changing, and how many of our strengths based on close ties to America and their deep ties between Nova Scotia and New England and of course America, but those strengths based on deep ties to America were becoming our vulnerabilities because of choices the U.S. was making. It's their right, but it's our imperative to respond. And people sensed even a year ago the rupture. But what I felt was the resolve, the determination of Nova Scotians to take matters into their own hands, and as of Canadians to take care of ourselves so we can take care of each other. And our government was elected with a clear mandate, a mandate to focus on what we can control to build a stronger, more independent, more resilient country, and to build Canada that works for all.
Once that realization takes hold, the response is no longer optional. It becomes strategic, because when a country begins to reassess what it once considered its strongest pillar, it cannot simply make minor adjustments. It has to rethink its positioning more broadly, and that is the direction Mark Carney is moving toward. This is not a short-term correction. It reflects a deeper structural adjustment. For decades, Canada's economic and strategic framework was closely tied to the United States. That model delivered stability and growth, but it relied on a level of predictability that is now less certain. Carney's response has been to expand Canada's options, building relationships across multiple regions, opening new trade pathways, and ensuring that economic activity is not concentrated in a single direction. Diversification in this context is not just about reducing exposure. It is also about increasing flexibility and influence, and that shift is already visible. New partnerships are being explored across continents, and trade channels are expanding into regions that were previously less central. These developments indicate a broader repositioning where Canada is building a network of relationships rather than relying on a single dominant partner.
Last big point I want to make is that while we're diversifying, or while we're building at home, we're diversifying our trading partnerships abroad, so we no longer are overly reliant on a single partner. Our mission is to double our non-U.S. exports, $300 billion in new trade. We've already secured 20 trade and security partnerships on 4 continents in less than a year. And that includes an agreement with China, which will unlock more than $7 billion in export markets for Canadian farmers, ranchers, lobster harvesters, and agri-food workers across this country.
What makes this transition even more important is that it is not only about moving away from reliance. It is also about strengthening internal capacity, because reducing dependence only works if it is matched by increased capability. That is where the focus on domestic development comes in. This includes investing in local industries, strengthening supply chains, and building the ability to produce critical goods within the country. The goal is not isolation, but resilience. For many years, a significant portion of economic value generated in Canada flowed outward through international supply chains and external production networks. That pattern is now being reconsidered. The emphasis is shifting toward ensuring that more of that value is retained domestically through investment, innovation, and production. This approach supports long-term growth while also increasing control. Control over supply chains, over industrial capacity, and ultimately over economic direction. And that level of control becomes increasingly important in an environment where global systems are under pressure.
That's everything. That's everything from conventional ships and planes, armaments, but it's aerospace to AI, it's cyberspace to outer space, it's critical minerals and essential infrastructure. And core to that strategy, as I just alluded, core to that strategy is becoming our own best customer, buying from ourselves, building our own industries, and creating hundreds of thousands, not just of jobs, but of high-paying careers.
This shift is not limited to economics. It extends into trade policy, diplomacy, and the broader structure of Canada's international relationships. What is being outlined is not simply diversification for risk management. It is a rebalancing of Canada's global position. For decades, the international system operated with a clear center, and Canada's strategy was aligned with that structure. But as that center becomes less stable, the strategy is evolving. Canada is expanding its reach across multiple regions, strengthening ties with different partners, and increasing access to a wider range of markets. This creates a model of engagement that is distributed rather than concentrated. In this framework, the United States remains an important partner, but it is no longer the sole focal point. Instead, it becomes part of a broader network. And that distinction is significant because it reflects not just a policy adjustment, but a shift in strategic thinking.
Some of the things that have been going on, when we talk about variable geometry in the world's changed. Alliances, some of them are less effective than other, they had been previously. You can rely less on the rules-based order. It's things like our partnerships with the Nordics, with the UK, and others who are going to help us achieve Arctic security and have complementary skills in space, in naval, in AI, and others, and we can build out our strategic capacities, which translate that into spillover jobs and activity for decades here in Nova Scotia and across Canada.
What Mark Carney presented in Halifax was more than an economic outline. It was a signal about how the global environment is changing and how Canada intends to respond. For decades, Canada operated with the assumption that its closest ally would remain stable and aligned with its interests. However, recent developments, particularly under Donald Trump, have introduced a level of uncertainty that cannot be ignored. Shifts in policy, changing priorities, and evolving rhetoric have all contributed to that reassessment. The response has not been hesitation, it has been adaptation, strengthening domestic capacity, expanding international partnerships, and ensuring that Canada's future is not tied exclusively to any single relationship. This is not about confrontation, it is about preparation. In a world where power dynamics are evolving and alliances are becoming more fluid, countries that adjust early tend to shape what follows. And Canada's current direction suggests an effort to be part of that group